Welcome to Andy's Donut, a podcast about everything, anything, and nothing in between. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode. Our guest today is my friend Ocean. Hello, Ocean. How are you?
Hello. I'm very good, actually. Yes, I'm looking forward to this.
I haven't seen you in a couple of years now,
Yes.
haven't I?
We used to play games together beyond Monopoly, which is one of the most friendliest clubs in York.
Yeah, that's true. So tell us a bit about yourself.
So I was born around here. I'm a Yorkshireman, so that's the best quality. Anyway, never mind. So, yeah, after that, I actually went to school in Torrington first, then Bootham. Then I went off to university in Liverpool. And then after that, I was practicing as an accountant for many, many years and brought up a family and all the rest of it. And about mid-40s, it's kind of like waking up. And as initially, the waking up process was into a spiritual form. That's, to my mind, the main driver behind all that's happening currently is a spiritual process. Actually, I went through a divorce, which was a tough time, but it propelled me into a whole journey, which has been visiting sacred sites around the world. I've actually had a blessed life, really, in terms of what opportunities I've had. And then about 10 years ago, this would be 2012, if everybody remembers back to those magical times when we were promised a huge shift in consciousness. But it happened, but it didn't happen the way we were expecting. So that gets us up to kind of like the moment the second level of waking up happens. When you first wake up, it's kind of like, for me, it was a spiritual. And the second waking up was understanding that a deeper truth about what's going on and the misinformation and the cabal and the dark side of the whole thing. And then that's progressed me to the point which we are now, where we're actually experiencing the final stages of the takedown of these negative beings.
It's a lot of things to talk about, but let's take it slowly. So Let's talk a little bit about yourself. What are you doing at the minute?
Well, it's a mixture of different things. I've got a whole load of different projects on the go. I've currently moved out of York to this place near Sandhutton, which is in the forest, because I wanted to get out of the 5G range. So I've set up a group called 5G Awareness York, which is to bring awareness to the problems of 5G. Now, the thing about 5G is it's got a positive and a negative side to it. So it's not completely negative, but the danger is that it goes down that path. So we need the awareness. But the trouble is the council just tried to explain it to them, but they're not listening. It's a challenge to explain things to people who don't listen. So there you go. That's one of the projects. The other project is the Planetary City of Light in York, which is centred in the Museum Gardens. There's the Free Thinkers York, which has turned into Frinkers York, which is a free thinking group that we meet up regularly every 2 weeks to talk about the current affairs. There's 144K mass meditations, which I do. Well, there's numerous things that I'm sort of involved with, along with playing games.
Are you retired now?
Oh, I'm retired. Yeah, I retired early because after practicing as an accountant, chartered accountant with Pricewaterhouse, I then went into business, worked at Higson's over in Castleford, and then left that to actually set up on my own as a SAP consultant and made a ton of money contracting in the IT world, which is fascinating, and retired early. So I've been doing this for about 10, 12 years, which is the mission, because I've actually discovered that I've got a mission for the ascension of humanity, which is like a huge mission. But fortunately, there's thousands and thousands of us doing it. We are going to make it as humanity, but there is a negative force out there that's trying to stop it happening.
Yeah, that's great. I think we're all on a mission.
Yeah, yes. Well, when you first go into the spiritual process, a lot of people struggle to say, well, what am I meant to be doing? So there is a sense that they haven't yet understood what their particular mission is. And there's a process where you need to go through. And the trick to it all is to understand that we're all given gifts, just as you're saying. Everybody's interesting. Everybody's got a story and everybody's got a role to play. Unfortunately, because of the money system that we've got, a lot of people spend most of their time struggling to survive in this crazy world that we're in. And so they can't fulfill their mission. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a new financial system which will be abundance for all, which means everybody will have sufficient funds to do what they're meant to be doing. And the world will transform very quickly if people are enabled to do what they're meant to be doing, which
That
isn't necessarily working in a crappy little job for very little money.
that sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. So how did you end up doing what you do?
The accountancy has actually got an interesting little story for interested. That my father was a lawyer, my mother was a doctor, so we're in a professional family, and I wanted to join a profession, do what your parents do. It's kind of like sort of a natural thing. But I couldn't stand the sight of blood, so what I realised I wasn't going to be a very good doctor, and I found law quite boring. So I'm going to be a lawyer. So I was struggling a bit, and so my dad organised a meeting with a friend of his who was an accountant who came over. He's actually the finance director at Reckitt's. And he said, "What a wonderful world accountancy is." And I thought, oh, I'll do that. And I loved it. I'm afraid it's been categorized by Michael Palin as sort of one of the boring jobs, but actually, it's actually very interesting. As an auditor, you go to different businesses and find out what makes the businesses tick and get to meet a lot of people and learn a lot about what goes on in business. And I found it very interesting for about 15 years, got to senior manager, but then the politics of these organizations overtook it, and I realized I wasn't cut out to be a partner because you have to sign in blood.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anybody who gets that high in the organization knows the difference between working for a company and actually signing your name in blood, as it were. That's what I put it down to.
Yeah.
Where Pricewaterhouse is number one, end of, and I didn't think it was, so I left.
Yeah. What happened after that?
Well, then I joined a client. I had a different choice of different clients that all wanted me to join, and I joined Higson's as a group financial controller, and I spent many years until we had a change in finance director after about 10, 15 years, and I was a bit of a threat to him basically. So we had a parting the ways, but the trick was I had to stay on until he made me redundant. He wanted me to leave, but I stayed on until finally he had to pay me out, and it paid off my mortgage, which is rather nice. So I've always had these moments in my life where you could see them as a negative, but actually if you look back and carefully at them, you realise they've given me an opportunity that I wouldn't have otherwise had, which was then to set up on my own, which was landed on my feet as a SAP contractor. I don't really know about SAP, but it's one of the most huge, ginormous computer systems that run very large businesses. And it's very complex. And I love doing that job as well. And got very good at it, actually. I don't want to boast anything, but actually I was really good at it. And that went on for about 15 years. So I got to understand how computers work and IT. And that's helped me a lot in understanding the spiritual path, would you believe? Oh, I wanted to say before I get into the sort of deep conversations that these are all my truths, and I'm not wanting to convert anybody to my truths at all. It's just my view. Do your own research. That's so important that we have to do our own way and find our own path through all this, because that's what the journey is really is the key to the whole thing. So it's my truth. And the other thing is, fundamentally, it's a deep mystery that's unsolvable. It's an unsolvable mystery. And I'll explain why that is when you understand we're living in a virtual reality. So that's a key stage in understanding we're in a matrix or a simulation, and there is a base reality somewhere. And according to one of the books I particularly like, called the Urantia book, it explains how that all fits together, which I can very happy to explain, but that will take a little while to go through how the whole universe works.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yes, well, in a couple of seconds I could explain the entire universe.
Brilliant. What was the lowest point in your life? What was the worst episode that you've experienced?
That's to be the divorce. It was really tough, mainly for the concern for my children who struggled. By the time it happened, they were all grown up. Well, my youngest daughter was 18, and it was difficult, I have to say.
Yeah.
It's not an easy process. When this happens, you find the children will take one side of the debate. And my daughter went with her mother, which I completely understand that. And my son, I think, understood more of my side of the story. But it's not an easy process to go through. I'd not recommend it, but a lot of people have to go through it. maybe 2, 3 times, I don't know.
Have you learned any lessons from that experience?
To forgive, that's the big one. Forgiveness is the path. It's what Jesus told us from the cross. You forgive. If we could only learn to forgive each other, life would be a lot easier.
Yeah, true. Do you have a person or an event that changed your life for the better?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of occasions. I've met so many different people and so on. I suppose the one that just came to mind when you mentioned that was during Valor Melchizedek, which I don't really know about the flower of life and his explanation of how the whole universe started, which was a flower of life in these circles, or this little point of consciousness that moved into geometric patterns, which grew into the entire universe, and the ascension process he was talking about. And I got to meet him in Sedona, and he activated the Merkaba, which is the light body.
How come you met him?
Well, I read his books, and what I do is if I really like someone's books, someone's story, he was online a lot at the time. This is all 2012 time. I have a sort of wish to go and actually meet them physically, because a lot of information you can pick up from books and from online, but there's a sort of specialness in actually meeting physically with someone. So I took the opportunity when he had a course on in Sedona, a 1-week course, which he said he'd activate the Merkaba. I thought, oh yeah, let's do that. So I had a friend of mine and we decided we'd go over there and get to meet him.
Oh, that's
and
great.
we did.
That's great. Do you have any hobbies?
Well, I wouldn't call them hobbies so much as sort of things I enjoy, which obviously one of them is playing board games, which, as I just mentioned, Beyond Monopolies are a particular group in New York that we both are members of.
What do you find fascinating about board games?
The ones I like are the big ones with big map with an historic settings. As you play the game, you get to learn or understand the dynamics of particular historical periods. And the one I particularly sort of resonates with me is Here I Stand, which I don't know whether you've ever played. It's a really big game, and there's a version after it called Version Queen, which is that period of time. Which the Here I Stand is Martin Luther sticking his treatises on the wall. That started the Protestant Revolution. Version Queen is about Queen Elizabeth, which is just slightly after that period of time. So those two. But there's many games. But I also like the science fiction games, which are the like Twilight Imperium.
So is it about the history behind them, or the mechanics, or the things you can?
Well, it's a combination of all of them, really. That it's like a puzzle.
Do you like puzzles?
Oh yeah, I like puzzles. Yeah, solving puzzles. It's kind of like keeps your mind active, because I'm getting on a bit. I won't actually say what I am, but mid-60s, and there is a concern out there of Alzheimer's and your brain not doing so well. So one thing I do is do regular puzzles, which I get the paper, just keep my mind active. But perhaps there's too much mind there, because I then go out and walk in the forest and just get in touch with nature and open the heart, which is the other, so you get this balanced perspective on life. I also play a lot of games on these apps. And one that Jim brought just recently was Indian Summer. I've been playing that virtually every day. It's a fascinating game, which is you've got a square, a cube, with a whole load of little funny symbols in them. And if you cover the symbols correctly and get 3 of them in these sort of special patterns, you get extra things which you can play out. And you've just got to finish the whole thing before your opponent finishes. That works really well.
So you're playing that with somebody else?
Oh, no, you play that on an app against artificial intelligence.
Do you travel a lot?
Well, I used to before COVID. A lot of travelling to sacred sites all over the world. And that was all part of the mission. But that was all complete with the Ein Sof Stargates, which I've got little websites which record all this if you're interested. There's the Adam's Earth blog and then the Ein Sof Stargates. And that was completed with Jerusalem, and then it's just opening up in the Giza pyramids. And that will activate the ascension curve for humanity. So that's happening now. So that's a key bit of that equation. But it involves going all over the place to Uluru in Australia, right over to Seattle, mountains mainly, and Table Mountain in South Africa. Oh, a whole load of them. But
So have you been everywhere?
Just about, except for Antarctica and Arctic.
It's never too late.
There's a few places I like to go. I'd love to go to Hawaii. That's my dream. I'd love to get out there.
Yeah, so any interesting experience in one of your journeys? I mean, all of them, I suppose they have their own specific...
Well, okay, one of the big ones was I was part of a group called Particle Convergence, which we went to Egypt and went through all the temples down the Nile, which is a series of initiation temples, which culminated in sitting in the king's chamber on the Pacific date, Pacific time, when all the planets were in alignment. And the closest, if you want to understand what was happening, it's like in one of the Thor films, but all the planets align. And that happened on what was called particle convergence, which happened in 2017, I think it was. And that was a meditation in the King's Chamber at this particular moment with a whole group of like-minded individuals. It was just absolutely awesome. Yes, that was a very special experience.
That's great.
And getting to sit in the sarcophagus. You know, there's a sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. That opens you up. It's a portal, basically. If you have an opportunity to get there.
Are you allowed?
Yes, but we had special permission because we had some Egyptian guides who knew the system, how to do it. And so we got in there at 6 o'clock in the morning when nobody else was there. So we had the pyramid all to ourselves and did the work up to about 8 o'clock. And then they said you had to leave because the public was let in.
Which temple was that?
It's the main pyramid, the main Giza pyramid.
Oh, okay.
There's 3 of them, but that one has been opened up, and there's what's called the ascending chamber into what's called the King's Chamber. There's a Queen's Chamber below it, and below that there's one I didn't actually go down to, which was because Junvala said he went down there, and he squeezed his head into right at the very bottom of the pyramid, and it's kind of like a weird experience, but I didn't really want to go down there, so I spent my time in the King's Chamber in the sarcophagus before everybody else came in.
Do you have a favorite book that changed your life?
There's lots of books. I've got a huge library of all different books. I suppose the Urantia book is a big one, which not many people know about, curiously. It's a book which has got 4 parts. The first part explains the whole thing from a universal perspective, or even beyond that, really. Then it talks about our particular local universe. We're actually in a local universe. There are other universes in the multiverse. And then it talks about Urantia, which is Earth. It's their name for Earth, this planet. And then the 4th section is about Jesus' life on a year-to-year basis, including all the missing years, which I think everybody should read, really, because it tells the story of this amazing man.
Where did you find this book?
Well, how did I come by it? I don't know how I came by it, but about 3 or 4 years ago, it's online. You can actually just download it as PDFs.
So it's not an actual printed book?
Oh, it is a printed book. I mean, I got the printed book, but you can also get it online on the Urantia Society, I think it's called. And they've also recorded it as audio, so you can listen to this, I think, 197 papers altogether. And each paper has been delivered, and they give you the source of each paper. And the way in which it was put together was actually in the 1930s, but it was only released as published in 1950s. So some of the information is presented in 1930s understanding of the world, and subsequently what's called a teaching mission, which is about information that's come in after that from the same source, but it's not got the same sort of authority that the original information has. But, it's an interesting additional information. But the 197 papers were put together through a process that I particularly like as an authentic process, which is deep regression, which is there are 2 people involved. One person is put into a deeply regressed state, and they go out of it. Basically, their personality comes to one side, and you have someone who's conscious, like you sitting there, recording what the person who's in a deeply regressed state is saying, because the extraterrestrial being will speak through the deeply regressed person with the right permissions and authorities. It's set up in a very protected, sacred space for this information. And there are 3 books that have come through that method, which I particularly like, which is Dolores Cannon did this, and she's got an amazing volume of information came through from her regression process. And then the Law of One is another major tome of information that I think is very difficult to understand. And David Wilcox does a great job as explaining it. And then there's the Urantia book came through the same mechanism. Channeling is a bit iffy. There are some channels I think that work, and I think some channels aren't as authentic. So the channels I particularly like, Lee Carroll, who channels Cryon, and Daniel Enkar channeling Bashar. I find those two to be authentic sources of information, particularly Bashar, which is someone who's 300 years in our future, who knows that this moment in time is so critical to their future that they have come in to give us the information we need now in order to make the right choices as a planet to move into the positive timeline. Because we're coming into what's called the nexus point. In about 5-10 years' time, there'll be two timelines will split. One is a positive timeline, which is called the Paradise timeline or the Ascension timeline. And the other one is the negative Armageddon timeline, which ends up in a kind of like dystopian world future, which we get to see on the films. Hollywood loves the dystopian future because that's their
end of the world, basically.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world. It's the end of the world we would know it as, but you go into a kind of cyberpunk world of dystopian security control. Everything's censored. You've got a few people.
Already.
Well, it's happening now, you see, because these two timelines are still. It's like someone explained to me, and I think it's probably quite a good way of seeing a Vesica Pisces, if you know what that geometric pattern is. It's two circles, and in the centre, the two circles overlap into a kind of like an oval shape, and we're in the oval shape with the two timelines playing out. You basically make a choice as to which timeline do you want to manifest in your life, because it's a virtual reality. We each have an opportunity with our own free will to choose which one we want to manifest. And there are some people that still sleepwalking in this, and they don't realise there's a choice to be made. But I'm afraid you've got to make the choice. For me, it's obvious. You choose the light, you choose the Ascension, you choose the Paradise timeline, which leads to this amazing world that's going to be in what's called the 5D. Or fifth dimension, or fifth density, to be strictly correct.
So if I'm going to read one of these books, will I make any sense of it? How do you start? I mean, which book would you start with?
Well, I've written 2 books myself called My Way Zen. You can get them on Amazon. The first book explains the spiritual path from a Zen perspective, and I love Zen.
So you start with Zen.
What you do in Zen is Zazen, which is sitting. You could think of it as meditation, but the thing about meditation is it sounds like you're doing something, whereas the whole point is not to do anything. Just sit,
Sure.
Which is quite a challenge.
And don't think of anything.
Well, you can't not think of anything, because thinking of not thinking doesn't work either, you see. So it's a process you have to understand, and I'm not necessarily the best person to teach it. I would say go along to a Zen group if you want to get involved.
Okay, so that's how you start.
Well, that's on the spiritual path. But if you want to understand the timeline story, there are numerous books out there, numerous podcasts. The one I particularly like is the Super Soldier Talk. They're interviewing people who've been trained up as super soldiers and have been to the bases on Mars and on the moon and out of the solar system and come back with real stories. You can tell that they're telling the real stories, but they themselves have had memory wipes. But some of them, the memory wipes don't work very well. And by a process that they go through, which is actually a regression type process with trained people who know how to do this, they can reconnect with the memories. And when they get back to the memories, other memories come. Some of them are quite awful memories and traumatic memories, but they've been brave enough to go and recover all the memories on this, what's called the 20-year and back program, which was they would put people into 20 years and then regress them back to 20 years and then bring them back into the life they used to live, using some sort of weird time travel thing. It's not actually time travel, it's kind of like a regression process, but you wouldn't believe what technology the extraterrestrials have compared to ours. Someone pointed out that advanced technology looks like magic to a primitive system.
It's true. If you take guns and go back in history 2,000 years ago, it's like magic.
They wouldn't know what you were doing. And you look at these phones and you're sort of talking across the world to someone in Australia. You can't do that. You have to go in a boat. Exactly. Well, even before boats, technology, advanced technology, people might say, it doesn't exist. It does exist because these people have actually seen it. like the med beds, which are going to be awesome when they come out, although there is a particular problem with med beds. Have you heard about the med beds? So
That's the thing. You see, you talk about all these things, all this terminology, all these words. I don't get it. A lot of people don't understand it. That's why I was asking you which book or where to go to start on it. Because
there's so much stuff on YouTube, but the one I like is Super Soldier Talk. Go on there if you really want to get your mind blown about what is possible for our technology, because there's a whole series of technology that the extraterrestrials would love to give us, but they can't give it to us until we grow up as a society and become what's called a just society. So we have fairness and a proper process of in our society. We're quite a long way off that currently.
Will that thing ever happen?
Oh yes, it's going to happen, because I've actually experienced what it is like to live in 5D. Well, what happens is you go up into this higher level of consciousness and understand the loving nature of the whole thing, and you sort of enter what's called oneness. But I don't want to make a big fuss about it, but in oneness, there's no you there anyway. We are going to move into that understanding. It's called Christ consciousness, if you like.
It's like what I'm trying to get out of you. It's like to make ordinary people understand what you're talking about. So if you can explain it like, I don't know, even if you use the wrong term as meditation, it's something people understand. That, so it's a higher state. You just get into this state where you can understand things.
Yes.
Is it something like that?
That's it, yeah. I think meditation is a great way in order for you to experience some of these truths, because meditation is actually just a tool. It's a way of getting to a certain level of understanding. And there's a point at which happened to me. There's a Madhyamaka when I was part of the NKT, which is a local group here in Pocklington. I was part of that group for a long while. And it's called the Wisdom Teachings. And, after an intense period of meditation, you move into a place where you experience what's called the I Am Presence. And the I Am Presence there's just the I Am witnessing or experiencing the world. But you shift your perspective out of the body-mind, you drop the body-mind, and you're into this other place which is indescribable, because it's not anything.
It sounds
a lot of masters try to get you there, but it's a way in which you can experience that the I Am, which is a name for what's indescribable.
Of course, you can't explain it.
No, you can't. You have to experience it, and the way to do it is just to sit. Actually, we call it sitting, and it's a really beautiful, blissful place because you're out of the game, basically. And at that stage, for me, knowing about the IT systems, the easiest analogy for understanding what's going on is that you're seeing the virtual reality for what it is. Now, when Buddha explained it, he used the word emptiness, because at that time, 2,500 years ago, it would no good explaining something to like virtual reality, because the guys in those days wouldn't have understood it. But I'm pretty sure my take on it is that what he described as emptiness, or the wisdom teachings, which is the method whereby you get from your ordinary perspective into what's called ordinary mind, because the enlightened state is ordinary mind. It's what you're experiencing right now. Everybody's enlightened. That's the daft thing about the whole thing. When you really understand what's going on, everybody is part of the divine process of enlightenment, but they don't realize it because they are attached to the body or the mind and thinking that's who they are, but it's not who they are.
Is it religion any help?
Religion can get you somewhere there, and if you're really going deeply into what Jesus taught, he was teaching this, but you perhaps have to get the Gnostic Gospels, they're called, which are the additional teachings, because the Bible is a wonderful document and there's a ton of information there, but it's been significantly edited over time, and there have been mistranslations and bits removed, particularly by a guy called Constantine, who was made emperor in York, would you believe? It's that guy that sits outside York Minster. His mother was called Helen, and a lot of churches call St. Helens, named after her, who was his mother and became a Christian because she had a vision of the Christ. I think it was actually as a sword or something, it was a cross, and convinced her son to bring Christianity into the Roman as an allowable religion. He didn't actually convert into it because at that time there was Mithraism, which was the bull sacrifice, and in order to bring it into the Roman system, he wanted to codify it. He wanted to say, well, what is this Christianity? And so they got rid of a whole load of things they thought wasn't Christianity and said, this is it. And they put it onto the canonical texts, I think they were called, and made the Bible. But before then, there was a lot of other information out there as to what Jesus taught, which you get a clear idea of that from the Urantia book, amazingly.
Go back to the book then.
Yeah, so I'd recommend the Urantia book to anybody who wants to get, well, particularly part 4, which is Jesus' life, if you're a Christian, because it tells you so much more about what he was about and his role that he played in releasing us from rebellion status, which I can explain as well, the Lucifer rebellion, because it's all in the book.
What lessons have you learned so far? Any war moments other than, the spiritual thing? Because obviously I understand that was a big... When did that happen? Can you remember that? The first time you heard about it or you realized it?
Well, I suppose actually I started with transcendental meditation. I don't really know about Maharishi, who was just a great light in this planet.
How did you end up doing that?
Well, I decided I was going to do 3 things. One was learn golf, for some reason. The other was paint watercolours, and the other one was to meditate. And I looked around, and meditation at that time, the big name in the game, this was about 30 years ago, was Maharishi's transcendental meditation. So I went along and learned the magic mantra that you get given and pursued that for a while. And I think that's the very first time I had some sort of, if you like, spiritual experiences of an altered way of seeing the world. One of them was of, I think she must have been Mother Mary, just this beautiful, loving being came into... I mean, there are beautiful moments when you experience them. I thought, oh, that was easy. It'll happen again. Of course, it didn't happen again. And you just have to just work with whatever is happening in your life.
Where was that? Was that in York?
That was, that would be... Yes, I was living over in East Yorkshire, in a place called South Cove.
Was that happening after your divorce?
It was happening about the same sort of time. The divorce was all down to the fact that I was on this journey and my wife wasn't interested, and my ex-wife wasn't interested in it at all. In fact, was quite negative to it. And I now know why, because it's all down to a karmic setup. Some of the things that happen in your life are coming from a previous life. It's called karma.
Yeah, I've heard of that. What are your plans for the future? What would you like to achieve?
The place I've got some big plans to set up a healing centre there. It's always a dream for all of us in the light community to offer healing to others. And my vision for that would be using very advanced technology that we have currently, which is from a guy called Dan Winter, who talks about the compression of the plasmic field in a negentropic phase conjugate. I mean, it just blows your mind, all this stuff. I've listened to about hours and hours and hours of Dan Winter explaining this. I've got a U3A course. That's another project that I'm on with. I have a little group where we meet up and we talk about, it's called Philosophy and Spirituality. The next year, I'm going to do it on ascension mechanics because it's so important that we know how to ascend and get ready for the ascension, because it's going to be awesome. And we want as many people as possible.
So are you giving talks and things like that?
U3A is for anybody that's over 55 to join. It costs, I think, £15 a year. And gives you opportunities to go to all sorts of courses and all sorts of things. And I run the Philosophy and Spirituality course. But the plan down the line is not only set up this healing centre in a yurt in the forest, because what Dan Winter explains is that it's all to do with the auric field. And the auric field is currently dependent on a whole load of what he calls hygiene, spiritual hygiene, which is you cut out all the things that, things like alcohol and whatever, things like that, clean it all up. But one of the main things you need to do is get into nature. And that's always on being a mantra of the spiritual community. And I never really understood why. But the reason is you can't expand your aura go through the ascension cycle in a aluminium square box, which is the modern building. You need to be in a natural setting where there's a forest and trees, stone buildings, wood roofs, a natural world. That enables the aura to expand. So I found the place and I've just got to find someone who's going to sell me a yurt, and I'll put the yurt in there. and I'll do sound healing along with, which is gongs and other crystal bowls and so on, along with the Quantify, or I might even go and buy Therify, which is the more powerful version, which puts the vortex, plasmic vortex, puts you into this expanded state, which enables lucid dreaming, which has been another of my wishes, because the dream life, there's a lot going on there that we don't know what's happening, and it's very important because we're going to get contact through our dreams.
Do you have a favorite quote, or do you have a principal idea that guides your life?
My favourite is Shakespearean play. Well, actually, it's my favourite play, really, is Midsummer Night's Dream. And the place I live, actually, curious, is near the fairy trail called Northwood Fairy Trail. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's well worth going. And a lot of the quotes that they use in the different places around the trail is from Midsummer Night's Dream, which is all to do with the two fairies, the king and queen of the fairies, which is Oberon and Titania. And in there, right at the end, there's this wonderful bit, which if I can remember, I will try and record it. But something gentle, if we spirits have offended, think on this and all is mended. You have but slumbered here, whilst these visions did appear, and this weak and idle theme is no more yielding but a dream. If you pardon, we will mend.
Right.
The last little bit wasn't quite right, but what he's saying is basically it's a dream. We're in a dream. We're in a virtual reality. And if you pardon, i.e. forgive, it'll be mended. You'll have a blissful life. But if you hold grudges against people, if you can't forgive, you're going to end up with difficulties.
Yeah.
That would be my advice to people. But it's actually in Midsummer Night's Dream, a really beautiful bit. I mean, Shakespeare had so many beautiful pieces of advice. And that's the one I particularly resonate with.
Do you have any stories you want to share with us?
Well, I've got lots of stories, but in fact, the whole of life is a story, if you think about it. It's like you're painting a picture or an artist's sort of... So if you can tune into what your own story is, find your own mission, I call it a mission, but it's sort of a grand word for knowing what you're meant to be doing. And that would be, the story, your story.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, that's the thing. It's hard to find your own purpose in life when you're busy going to work and paying bills.
Yeah. And it's real beautiful when you get in touch with your own mission, because what happens is, this is another bit people need to understand, is that when you're following your mission, life becomes easy because you're doing what you're meant to be doing. In my book, I call it the next step philosophy, which is you'll often get nudges to do something, but, I'm too busy, I haven't got any money, and the nudge will recede. But if you're willing to take the next step and actually follow your intuition, your bliss, as Joseph Campbell said, the next step will be revealed. But you won't get the whole lot. You won't get the whole vision because it's dependent on taking the next step, and you keep on taking the next step. And you get little messages from the universe as to what the next step is. Now, you can make mistakes early on, and I made a few of them. And when life becomes difficult, you've fallen off the track. So you do what's called a course redirect, and you say, I need to sit into silence, go into meditation, tune into your higher self, if you like, ask for what's learning here, and then you'll be given over the next, it may not be in the first time, but there will be at some stage, because the higher self wants you to move forward and will have given you the incidents in your life, your experiences, in order for you to follow the next step. But you need to actually do it. You can't think about it and then, I'll do it next week and then not get around to doing it. You have to actually do it. So there's a challenge here. You always get a challenge that you can achieve. You won't be given an impossible challenge. It will be a challenge, but you can do it if you're willing to do it.
You just have to do it.
You have to do it though.
Yeah.
But everybody has something in their world that they will find that they are the most joyful. When you're in bliss or in joy from doing something, that's what you're meant to be doing, because you're meant to have a joyful life.
Yeah. But it's hard for people. It's hard to find what they want to do. And they always find these excuses of, as you said, not time, money, and all that.
Yeah. And that's fine. Different people at different stages of life. It's not. I mean, I've been very fortunate in my life, so in a way, I have the financial and time and energy to follow my dream. my story, my bliss. And that is to help others, because when you really get deep into this, you really discover it's not about you. This is about helping others. It's about service work. And so the two areas that I find I would really love to do is, number one, talking, because I'm a Gemini and I just love talking. So I'm very happy to be doing this sort of interview, because it's an opportunity to get some of my information out there, although I do say right at the beginning, this is just me talking, and I'm not trying to convert anybody to anything. Well, I do recommend, as you said, books that you might recommend. And I'll say, well, read the Urantia book for starters.
How do you spell that?
Urantia.
It's just I'm trying to get people to share their own experiences and their own ideas and perspectives, because I think everyone has something to say, everyone has a story, everyone can share with the rest of us, so we can learn something from others. Because even if both of us go to the same events in life, we'll have different stories to tell.
Yes, exactly. I call it my way Zen part 1. The very first chapter is called Unique Self, and that is understanding that everybody has their own particular journey, if you like, their own self, their own truths. And the beauty about Earth, Urantia, is there are so many different belief systems, political systems, religious systems. It's a melting pot of just a huge array of different views. And the beauty is to have all those different views working, if you like, conflict in harmony, it's called, or harmony through conflict. So these different views will predominate. The worst thing that would happen is some totalitarian system where everything's censored other than the one view of some idiot megalomaniac or something. That would wreck the ecology of the beauty of Urantia, or Earth.
Yeah, true. So are we going towards 1984?
There is a plan. It's far worse than 1994. I mean, that's part of the what they got in mind, but it would be an absolute disaster. But of course, it's a free will planet, and so there are some people who actually want to experience the Mad Max world, And for me, if they want to experience it, I'm not going to stop them.
So what do you think is going to happen in the future? Do you see a bright future for
very, very
us?
bright? There are two timelines. Initially, it appears as a bifurcation, but within the Paradise timeline, there are two versions of it. The negative timeline, that's for the idiots that want to go into the negative dystopian future, and hats off to them. They can go and experience that world if they want to. I wouldn't, but there are some idiots out there.
Are we not going all in the same direction?
No. It's a choice between the two timelines. But those that go on the Ascension timeline, apparently, the society that will evolve in that timeline can have two versions. One of them is an organic version of people wanting to be close to nature, live by growing their own food, growing their own things naturally, and living in beautiful, loving communities, and being in sacred work in those communities. And they will live in the country. And then there's another group of people who love technology and want to live in a technological smart cities and so on. And they all go into the cities, and there'll be high-speed rail links between all the various cities. So, Birmingham, Manchester, wherever it is. And they'll just sort of whiz past the country. You won't even see it. It'll just look like a blur as they go from one city to another city to go to another sort of world where they've got their little iPhones and their virtual reality headsets and all that kind of carry on. And that will be what they wanted. They'll be living on the same planet, but they will experience the world differently. And I imagine over time, this timeline will develop into more and more strands as different lifestyles will manifest. But those are the true primaries, the technologically driven group that will use technology for the ascension effectively into this higher way of operating, and then the organic group. Anyway, so it's a vision that Magenta Pixies put together, and I thought, oh, well, that makes sense to me. So there is sort of alternatives within the ascension. You're not just stuck with the living an organic life, because it's not going to suit everybody to go back to nature effectively.
Are we not living that already?
Well, yes, you're quite right, because as I say, we're in Visca Pisces. We're already manifesting the fifth dimension now. It's possible now. It's actually heaven on earth. And there are moments when you can actually experience that. For me, it's going into nature and just seeing the beauty of everything and realizing that it's just gratitude is the main feeling when you're in this place. You could call it love, but it all sounds very grand, but it's just being in touch with who you are. in the beauty of the world in its pristine, loving form. But then, of course, you come straight out of that and you start listening to David Icke talking about the dystopian future world that a bunch of idiots want to bring about because they think that they will run the show, but they won't, because they're just puppets to... because I haven't explained how the whole thing, the pyramid structure of the famous pyramid, the Illuminati pyramid, with a disconnected top section. So we're at the bottom, in the biggest number at the bottom. And above us, there's the corporations that control a lot of our lives, is determined by what the corporations do. And there are a few huge corporations that drive a lot of what goes on, including, of course, the media system. And then above them are the banks and the financial control system. And the banks are themselves controlled by a small group of individuals in the what's called the IMF and the Bank of International Settlements. And they themselves are controlled by, we're getting really quite close to the top now, by a group what's called the Archons, which are the rulers and the bloodlines. And above them, there is a group which we don't really know who they are because they're behind the scene controllers. But they may be human or they may be extraterrestrial. I don't really know where they are. But they themselves, and part of them are reptilian, I have to say, because I now understand a lot more about the extraterrestrial story, which is hugely complex, and I can spend a little bit of time explaining it all. But the reptilians do play a role in it all. The understanding that I've got to is that the reptilians are full of what's called nanites, and the nanites are controlled by artificial intelligence. So at the very top of the whole thing, it's artificial intelligence.
Isn't that bad for us?
It is, because they don't feel. They don't have a heart.
How can we get out of it?
We've got to be very careful with artificial intelligence. Elon Musk has come out and said, that's our biggest problem as humanity, is artificial intelligence. And currently, very few people are talking about it and understanding the risks that we face and doing anything about it. So people we're going down a trap, a hole here, which we've got to get out of. But we can, because in the organic world, we're not going to have to worry about it. Because, I haven't explained the main thing in my first book is the great solar flash, it's called, or the EMP or the coronal mass ejection from the sun, because the sun is driving so much of this, because it's going through its own ascension cycle, and the whole solar system is as well, which David Wilcox explains at great length, which I put into my book, is that all the systems like Mars, Venus, they're all changing as they're going through their own ascension process. And at some moment in time, it's called the event, there will be a huge coronal mass ejection from the planet, so 360 degrees, so we can't avoid it. It will come to this planet. And it's a gift from one perspective, because it'll raise the consciousness through the ascension into the light body, into this dimension. And that will split the timelines at this nexus point. So you'll be either going to the fifth dimensional, loving, light-filled world, or your choice will be to the negative dystopian future.
You said about choice here, but then you say we're controlled by AI. So what choice do we have?
The AI controls the Archons. The Archons control the financial system, who control the corporations, which are endeavouring to control us. And a lot of us are mind controlled. But there's a few of us that aren't.
What is our choice?
Well, you've got your own choice to make. You can decide, do you want to go into the Ascension, the Paradise world, or do you want to go into the dystopian future, which is all down to artificial intelligence and mind control and that kind of dystopian cyberpunk world.
It's difficult to choose when you have no control.
Oh, you do. You have free choice. You are a powerful individual with your own free choice, which can't be undone. You have the power to do it. But you also have to do things as well. So there is an intention process. In fact, one of the things I learned from, she asked about sort of ways of understanding worlds. When I was part of the Oneness University, which is Sri Bhagavan and Amma Bhagavan, he came up with what's called the success formula. And the success formula is intention, action, and grace equals success. So intention is you can intend for things to happen, but you need to take the action. Intention on its own is insufficient. There's a sort of something you actually have to do. But in addition to that, you need grace, which is there for you all the time. But there's a way in which you need to sort of like tune into it, and then your life will go down the successful path you want. So, those three components, I thought that's a great way of trying to understand why some people intend for a different world for themselves, but can't seem to achieve it, because you need to tune into all three.
Yeah, true. Do you have a website or a page or social media or something like that where people can get in touch with you or find out more information about what you're talking about?
Yes, I've got a variety of different websites, which I've all put onto the Wix platform because it's free, and some of them have got domain names, but the one that's kind of like I've built, which has all the links to all the other ones, is Wix /OMX369. I think that's what it is, but I can give you the link and then you can put it alongside the podcast. So that will take you into a website that's got a number of pages with the projects that I'm running, then historical websites that I've put together to chart the course. Why I put all this together, I don't really know, although I do have 2 grandchildren. I think one day they may, in the Paradise timeline, because this is all to do with our future and our children. As you've got children, you want to leave them a world they can live in and not some dystopian future, for God's sake.
True. Yeah. What about your books? What are they called? Where can we get them?
My Way Zen. And if you just type My Way Zen into Amazon, you'll find the link. And there's 2 books there. I've also written a couple of other books which I think are there. One of them is on Echo Homo, which is about a painting I painted in South Africa. But My Way Zen is, and the 2 My Way Zen books are the 2 I would start with if you want to understand some of the stuff that I'm trying to talk about. But as I was just saying before, they have got a lot of links to other places, because what I've been able to do is put together information from different sources into I call it like a jigsaw puzzle. So, when you start off with a jigsaw puzzle, it's a muddle. You don't know where to start. And you're trying to get the edges first, and then you start building into the center. And as you get more and more puzzle pieces, you're beginning to understand what the picture's about. But initially, it doesn't look very much. It might be a bit of blue at the top and a bit of green at the bottom, but it doesn't really tell you what the real story is all about. So you have to put the puzzle pieces in, and the more puzzle pieces you get, and you can fit into the structure, you're beginning to see the big picture. And you're never going to get, as I said right at the beginning, it's an unsolvable mission. You're never going to get the final piece, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a life journey, I suppose.
It is a life journey, yeah.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for our talk today. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. And probably we'll do this in the future as well.
Yes, there's a lot more information in this noggin that I'd love to hand out. So thank you very much for giving me the interview.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for listening. See you next week. Bye.